Bill. Roll on, Columbia. So with those words, Woody Guthry spoke to the physical and spiritual power of this river. And in the decades since, that power, the power to bring us together in regional common purpose, has allowed the dawn to prevail over the darkness. So just like we are not Republicans or Democrats first, but Americans first, when our country requires us to set aside our differences and act collaboratively, the same is really true with respect to our regional allegiance to this river. Because the Columbia River unites us all the way across this basin. It enriches us, it enlivens us, and it electrifies us. We are really honored today to have with us leaders from both parties who represent all the members of the Pacific Northwest Congressional Delegation, who for 75 years have worked together to ensure that the benefits of this powerful public waterway will be dedicated to the people of this region. Those of us who work to earn the title of trustworthy stewards of this river have etched in our minds the purpose of why we came to exist 75 years ago. It is, as envisioned by the forefathers of this fabulous hydro system, that the public waterways must and always be used for the public good. I'd like to take you back for a moment to 1937 and what life was like. I don't believe any of us can really comprehend the agony of the Midwestern Dust Bowl refugees who braved unfathomable adversity to claw their way across the American landscape to this exotic place. They came seeking water, and when they arrived, it was water they got in the form of one of the largest and most powerful rivers in the world, only to be bludgeoned by a brutal fact that men and women cannot live by water alone. It somehow had to be harnessed. Its power had to be connected to their lives. So Woody Guthry, who we did hire way back then to roam the Columbia, captured the desperation caused by being so close and yet so far away, writing, "My eyes are crossed, my back's in a cramp, trying to read my Bible by my coal oil lamp. Oregon State is mighty fine if you're hooked up to the power line, but I'm just a mile away from the end of that line." And when you think of the words backbreaking labor, which we really don't recognize today, I want to encourage you to absorb what life meant for people who carried gallons and gallons of water every day and every night because there was no electricity for pumping. And for children forever imprisoned by the dead-end sentence of a third-grade education because their raw physical energy was literally critical to the survival of their families. Now, these folks were quite conscious that their lives could have been different had affordable electricity been within their grasp. And so, at the insistence of Franklin Roosevelt, this dam and the Grand Coulee Dam were built, putting tens of thousands of citizens to work at the height of the Depression. And in so doing, he was emphatic that the benefits be spread to all the people who live in the four Northwest states that comprise the Columbia River Basin. The legislation that made all this possible was sponsored in a bipartisan, multi-state fashion, a tradition that continues to this day. And the idea was revolutionary. Electricity from large dams would be available only for the cost to produce it, and transmission would be built to deliver power to the people. The same structures that would generate electricity and cause crops to thrive were also intended to create a navigable river that would penetrate the heart of the Northwest to transport timber and wheat and fruit and wool to the world's ports. So outsized in scale, so stunning was this vision, our lives in the Northwest today would be unrecognizable, with the sole exception of the majestic beauty that surrounds us, without the laws which conceived this hydropower and transmission system. Now, it didn't come without fierce resistance that was blunted with even fiercer conviction. It was taunted as power for jackrabbits and coyotes because the population of the Northwest was so small and so poor, and it was denounced as lunacy. Denounced, that is, until December 7th, 1941. So we naturally think of war visually, sort of on the battlefields of Normandy or Iwo Jima. But World War II was another kind of battle as well, a race for industrial mobilization. President Harry Truman said, "America might not have won that war without Grand Coulee and Bonneville Dam." Power from the Columbia River produced the aluminum for 60,000 planes that flew in World War II and built 1/4 of all the ships in that war that sailed from our side, as well as for the Manhattan Project. This is a place that distinguished itself on a global scale as a bastion of freedom built on the spirit of the men and women who invisibly make this system hum. 67 years has passed since the war ended, and in that time, the public interest has evolved, retaining most of that original focus on economic development, but adding to it the strong Northwest ethic of love for and stewardship of the land and the water. The vast array of economic and environmental benefits derived from this system is probably well beyond even what FDR contemplated. The potentially devastating floods that were averted because of working together collaboratively across the Columbia River Basin, including a model international partnership with Canada. Some of the lowest electric rates in the country that incent job creation, attracting the industries of tomorrow and leaving more money in your pockets. A renewable electric power system that's the nation's largest provider of electricity producing zero air emissions, including CO2. In fact, without the Columbia River hydro system, there would probably be 15, think about this, 15 more coal plants in the Pacific Northwest. Funding for one of the world's foremost energy efficiency programs, helping to keep bills low and the air clean. Wind projects producing even more energy than Bonneville Dam itself, located not coincidentally within 100 miles from here. A system that is owned by the public and accountable to you and our retail utility customers, who are our partners in delivering this not-for-profit power to the people, persist in keeping us honest on this point every single day. Oh, and by the way, there's something else that's really unique. As promised by Roosevelt himself, and you heard it here today, an infrastructure investment that has been fully repaid to the U.S. Treasury with interest. All of these things are made possible by this huge, resilient, and life-sustaining river, and we must nurture her capacity to serve generations to come. All of these things are brought to you by a cadre of public servants in the true sense of those words. People who find their work to be meaningful and important because they know it's about serving their friends, their neighbors, their relatives, only on a regional scale. So countless people were emancipated from the grip of poverty. Freedom was secured, lives were saved, our quality of life has been enhanced, and our air is the cleanest in the nation. What could possibly tug at our conscience in the shadow of those accomplishments? Well, the development of this river has exacted a cost in terms of the native fish and wildlife that inhabited the river's reach, and a cost to the cultural and spiritual life of the people who relied most on the river's natural bounty and received the least from the development of this system, the region's native tribes. What has been done over the history of this river for the greater good should have been greater still. Today, with broad and bipartisan support, we seek to do better. Just a few years ago, and up the river a ways, Terry Guthry Rambler of the Yakima Nation Tribal Council expressed, through a veil of tears, that the mists of Celilo Falls would never again be felt on her face, but that she had real hope for the first time that we would find a way to walk forward in partnership. And Ron Suppa, who's here today, then chair of the Warm Spring Tribe, said that we came as adversaries and litigators, but we leave as partners. That spirit of collaboration and partnership to solve problems is true to the vision that is the foundation of this place. Together, we are beginning to right the wrongs. The evidence is clear. The largest fish and wildlife restoration program in the world, created together, has halted and is reversing the decline of salmon in the Columbia River Basin. We stand today at the rallying point for all who live in the Northwest. It brings together the people of Oregon and Washington and Idaho and Montana. It brings together people of all races and creeds, all who call the Northwest home. And now we look to the future. We have something special, something unique, a river of opportunity. Because of what we have built together for all who live in the Northwest, we are freer than others to dream great dreams, as outsized as the ones at the beginning of this 75-year-long chapter. Then we brought down the barriers that stood in the way of people's hopes to be able to live a life free from poverty. Today we seek to go further, to bring down the barriers that separate economic success from ecological health and unite them in common purpose. Roll on, Columbia, roll on.